Chargers general manager Joe Hortiz spoke at the NFL scouting combine, and usually they don't say much, but we were able to get some pretty interesting nuggets, including the Chargers believing that Zion Johnson could play center in 2025.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers now for 9 seasons together, but this is our 7th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listen. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Well, Daniel, as you said, Chef Hortiz was at the podium, and we have to figure out if it's sizzle or if it's sauce. And, of course, he gave us some great information, as well as Zion Johnson possibly moving to center. That's an interesting one. And also, Rashawn Slater hopefully getting that big contract extension that he so richly deserves. And we also get a little bit of his ideas on Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, what the philosophies are as far as roster building is concerned with relation to the draft, and how he likes to handle free agency.
Yeah, there was a lot of good tidbits I thought we got from him. I think he was pretty candid in some moments. I think if you read between the lines, you learn some very interesting, maybe some concerning, maybe some exciting things from it. But let's start with the biggest thing that came out of it that I don't think any of us thought would happen in 2025, which is that with the Chargers' struggles on the interior last year, the Chargers could potentially move Zion Johnson to center. So he's asked about the centers and what the Chargers' plan is. They've obviously been vocal about saying, hey, we like Bradley Bozeman and we'd love to have Bradley Bozeman back. This would tell me otherwise a little bit, because this is what he said per Omar Navarro. Eric Smith, who put out a great article on it on Chargers.com. I think he can do it. I really do. Joe Hortiz said, I know he's working at it right now, so I think Zion can do it. And we got other guys, you don't really know yet. They were younger, not as much opportunity, that have been working at it as well. So he's talking about in-house options that the Chargers have in center right now, because if you look at the roster, you don't see any. There's not anyone on the roster you'd be like, that is the guy. Brandon Hymus was the backup center last year. He's an unrestricted free agency. Bradley Bozeman is a free agent as well. He's telling you, hey, we have some options at center on the roster, and one of those options is Zion Johnson.
Which is very interesting to me, the reason why this is interesting is this would be his 3rd different position on the interior of the offensive line in his career, going into his 4th season. His first season he was at right guard, over 1,184 snaps, 5 sacks, 7 hits, 40 pressures. And then the last 2 seasons he played at left guard. And I think, just the thing with Zion Johnson is, hey, this is a 1st-round pick. You're trying to figure out where he fits and if he can factor in to the future plans, because obviously he's had his struggles, right? And that's an interior that has to get overmade, that has to get overhauled, it has to get upgraded. And if he can show that he can play center competently, then maybe that gives him another avenue to really extend his career, but also opens up more holes on the offensive line that the Chargers have to solve.
Yeah, so that's the interesting part of this too, is it first means that they're at least open to Zion Johnson not being the left guard in 2025. And when you're looking at how the chairs would be rearranged after the game of musical chairs that's about to happen, you kind of assumed the most likely outcome was that you release Trey Pipkins at right guard, find a new right guard. You don't bring back Bradley Bozeman, and you find a new center. And I think most fans would be happy if you're upgrading 2 out of the 3 of those positions. I think you'd feel really good about it. But as a 1st-round pick, as someone whose contract is guaranteed, I think everyone assumed if there was one guy that's coming back probably in the same spot that he is right now, it would be Zion Johnson. And I think out of the 3 of them, you'd be most okay with that, but it is still going into year 4 where you're still trying to figure out exactly how good this dude is, because there's flashes everywhere, but there's no sort of consistency where he's ever put it together for an entire season, for an extended stretch. And in that playoff game, him along with everyone else got exposed. So
yeah,
my thing is, Zion Johnson, one of the seemingly biggest things he has struggled with is just kind of the identifying of blitzes, knowing who to pick up, seemingly getting tricked at times. And when I think of the center position, that's a position you want kind of you're one of your smartest players, right? Someone that can help Justin Herbert diagnose who's coming, and certain parts of it that just aren't the physical nature. The physical nature wouldn't be Zion Johnson's problem. He has the right build to go play center, right? He'd make a good center physically. It's the mental part of it that would give me some struggles as far as, hey, I don't know if he can for sure kind of take that and run with it. But I think no matter kind of how you're looking at it, if that is part of the plan, Zion Johnson at center in 2025, it cannot come without some serious competition there as well, David, because even though I'm glad the Chargers are considering someone else at left guard, it doesn't mean I just want to hand it to Zion Johnson at center who's never played the spot.
Absolutely not. I mean, no matter if you have him at left guard or at center, there should be major competition for whatever spot that he wants to play, because his play, one of the good things is he's been durable. He's been available. He's played over 1,000 snaps in all 3 seasons, which is great. But the quality of those snaps have been lacking at points in his career. So I don't think that you can hand him any kind of starting role at this point. Even with the pedigree of being a first-round pick, what you put on the field, it really, I think, defines you more so than where you were drafted. So in this situation for Zion, he's got to have to prove that wherever that he wants to play, that he is the best man for that job.
Yeah, and he was coming out of college known for being a really smart player. Maybe this is something where that could be the position he should have been all along. He did take snaps there at the Senior Bowl. He has been reportedly taking snaps in the offseason so far at center, getting used to that position. And it seems like they told him in the exit interview, whatever it is, this might be your best chance at a starting role in 2025, which if the homework for him was to begin figuring out how to snap the football, seems like that message was made to him one way or another. How explicit it was, if they told him he wouldn't be the starting left guard, or, he would at least have competition there, that part we don't know. But the good news for the Chargers is they have both the tackle spots figured out for 2025, but in Rashawn Slater's case, you're trying to see it for much longer than that. And we did get at least a tiny update on where it stands with Rashawn Slater right now, who's an all-pro left tackle. And he said, Joe Hortiz, that is, we've had conversations. I love Rashawn. And Rashawn is a great player, and he helps us win football games. So I'd love Rashawn to be around for a long time. This is an interesting one because, it's probably ongoing conversations with him. The other part of it is, there's really not a rush to it, right? This isn't something that has to happen right now. Now, they could make it happen if they want more money to work with, depending on, how many people they sign in free agency. Right now, he's looking at a $19 million cap hit, which could come down with an extension and probably would. So if they wanted to move money around that way, they could do it sooner. Most of the time when we see these deals get done, though, it is closer to the start of the season. We saw it with Derwin. We saw it with Joey Bosa. And that was of, regimes past. We haven't seen this team have to pay top money to one of its own homegrown stars yet. But I think the good news is that there's really no rush about it right now because he is under contract in 2025, whereas most of the attention right now is probably going to the guys you're trying to re-sign of your own free agents.
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at Rashawn Slater and okay, I know exactly what I have here. I have one of the best tackles in the National Football League, and he's my blind side protector. Yeah. I don't think there's any evaluation that goes into it. It's really just a matter of when, not if. I think this is something that absolutely is going to get done. It's really just a matter of how much money Rashawn Slater is going to make, and no matter what that number is, every penny of it is absolutely deserved.
And if you want to know what that's looking like right now, the top tackle on the market is making about $28 million. So you're probably going to have to beat that. And he would be worth it. And I think the other nice thing is you're going to have Joe Wall on a very reasonable contract through 2027, especially because he's already shown that he can play tackle at maybe not an elite level yet, but he was knocking on the door of it as a rookie. And that you have an above average guy who started at, right tackle after playing left tackle his entire collegiate career and tackle career, really. And he moved over and played well right away. So you're going to have him on a good deal. I think that makes it a little bit easier to swallow the pill of whatever Rashawn Slater's contract is going to be. And 100% he has earned it with how he's toughed it out and just his level of play. But we still have more to get into, including maybe some kind of unfortunate foreshadowing by Joe Hortiz on what's going to happen with Khalil Mack, and also him continuing to say that Joey Bosa might not get cut before the season. We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. David, we did get some more juicy nuggets from Joe Hortiz that we still have to get into. And of course, like I said at the beginning of the show, you don't ever know what you're getting out of these people. They're going to tell you the things that benefit them the most at the time.
Smoke and mirrors, baby.
It is smoke and mirrors. I mean, I know you said sauce and sizzle. It's really smoke and sizzle, right? There's either some fire there, or it's just all smoke getting put out, and it's all strategic. And I think that I was surprised to kind of get some candid offerings from Joe Hortiz, especially in regards to Khalil Mack. And he brought up something I hadn't really thought about when thinking and talking about the Khalil Mack situation. So from Eric Smith and Omar Navarro, this week we'll probably tell you a little bit more because people are talking, but we'll have good conversations. Joe Hortiz said, I'd like to get him done before free agency starts, but Khalil's never been a free agent in his life. So it might be something where Khalil says, hey, I was a free agent, I did it, and I came back to LA. If it gets to that, that's my hope. That scares me. No, it's right off the bat. That really scares me because it doesn't necessarily seem like a foregone conclusion that he's going to test free agency, but I hadn't really thought about that, right? Signed an extension with the Raiders, ends up getting traded to the Bears, signs an extension there, ends up getting traded to the Chargers, where he has never been a free agent. I understand the allure of someone, especially at this point in his career, who wants to say, hey, I want kind of to get wined and dined and have everyone tell me how good I am, and also tell me exactly how much I'm worth and how much I could get on the open market. The Chargers could sign Khalil Mack at any time right now. But when I heard that, it gave me a little bit of Joe Shane vibes from Hard Knocks in the offseason last year, where he's talking to Saquon Barkley on the phone, and he says, hey, you know, we love you, we want to let you test free agency, but make sure before you sign somewhere else, you'll just give us that call to give us a chance to match it or something else. And what happens, right? He goes to the Eagles, he wins a Super Bowl. So, David, I think a lot is kind of said there. And I said it on yesterday's show when talking about Khalil Mack. If it makes it to him testing the market, it's going to scare me a little bit. And now I'm officially a little bit scared.
Yeah, 100%. And I said it before as well. Khalil Mack's going to have no shortage of suitors if he does get to free agency. And one thing that we know about Khalil, and he's made it very, very clear, is he wants to win a championship. He wants to win a playoff game. Yeah. And all of the power on where he decides that he wants to try to accomplish those goals is all completely in his hands if he elects to get to free agency. He can pick whichever team he wants to that he feels like is going to give him the best opportunity to win. So that is definitely something that is concerning because, you know, when you leave it up to him, I don't know if it's really about the money at this point in his career. He's made a lot of money. I mean, a lot of money, you know, over $100 million in his NFL career. It's about the prestige now. It's about the legacy. It's about winning a championship. So the Chargers have to make sure that not only do they compensate him fairly for, you know, what he believes that, you know, he should make, but also that they are going to get over the hump and get that playoff success that he so desperately is looking for.
And rightfully so, right? Yeah, I mean, he will be one of the greatest players ever. I mean, I haven't done the research on this. Maybe the best player ever, you know, especially at that position, to never win a playoff game if that's how his career ends up going. It would be a travesty. And the one place I disagree with you a little bit is the money could be important as far as a tiebreaker, because the thing is there aren't going to be a shortage of teams. There aren't going to be a shortage of really, really good teams, right? So if you're picking between two playoff-bound 2025 teams or two contending teams and one team's offering you $5 million more than the other team is, that could make the difference. Who knows, right? I mean, players all the time say, it's not about the money. We don't care about the money. It doesn't matter at all. And then they sign for the most money they can get. And
well, you know who does care about the money? Their agents. That's for sure.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think that it's scary because they could get the deal done now and they're just not. And it's because, as Joe Hortiz is telling you, he thinks that Khalil Mack wants to test free agency. But one thing Daniel Popper brought up that's worth mentioning too is that all the agents are at the scouting combine right now. So even though the tampering period doesn't begin until March and all of those things, Khalil Mack is going to figure out what his market is this week, as Daniel Popper put it. So the rumblings are going to go out there. His agent's going to be able to put out feelers. So it should give him a better perspective about what the offers he's going to get are compared to the offer that Joe Hortiz, I'm sure, has already put on the table. Because that's the other concerning thing. There's no possible chance at this point that Joe Hortiz hasn't given the offer, right? Joe Hortiz has made it known the Chargers will be willing to pay him, right? Like that part has already happened. Yeah. And at this point, he hasn't signed that contract yet. So there's a chance we at least have to, wrap our mind around the possibility that Khalil Mack's not going to be back in 2025.
Yeah, that's definitely not something that I want to look at. I mean, considering what that edge room is and how important he is, not only on the field, but as a leader too. I mean, he has that aura. He has that presence, that's been brought from what he's done in this league and how masterfully he's played the defensive end position from a just complete football standpoint. Just nasty and rugged and run support, and a guy that can forklift offensive linemen into quarterbacks even at this stage of his life and his career. Khalil Mack is a very special player, and the Chargers would have a gaping hole if they had to replace him this year.
Yeah, that's the thing. You don't become a more physical team if you lose Khalil Mack. It's almost physically impossible. Yeah. So he fits what the brand the Chargers want to be so badly that it's hard to not take that as a huge loss. And if you want to, find some kind of silver lining to it, I mean, if he does leave and signs for something the Chargers weren't willing to give him, that should net the Chargers a heck of a comp pick, right? I mean, we're talking maybe a third-round comp pick for him potentially. Obviously, that doesn't help you this year, though, which is where you're trying to win. It's win-now time for the Chargers. You're losing a huge win-now piece. And I think the other reason you feel like the edge room would be in kind of such a panic at that point is because you're assuming that the Chargers are going to release Joey Bosa. So not only would you be losing Khalil Mack in that situation, but you would also be losing Joey Bosa, who's obviously been one of their better edge rushers of all time, frankly. But when asked about Joey Bosa coming back to the Chargers on his current cap hit, which is $36+ million right now, Joe Hortiz, as he did after the season ended, continued to contend that the Chargers are absolutely willing to bring him back at that number. He said, yeah, you can do that. Absolutely. I love Joey. I had a chance to be around him, and I know that he wants to retire a Charger. Hortiz said he's made that statement. I'd love for him to retire a Charger. So he took the pay cut last year. I think that bought a lot of, goodwill in the eyes of fans. And I mean, that's just money they're not giving him, right? Which almost never happens at the NFL level. Now, there's almost no way they could get him to take a pay cut that would get it to a number that you feel like he could play to that level, right? I mean, he's making it. You're not going from $36 million to $20 million. I guarantee you that. And even a $20 million edge rusher, if you look at the guys, who are going to make $20+ million off of what they did last season, those seasons are going to look a lot better than the one that Joey Bosa just put together. At the same time, David, I still, even after hearing this, I feel like it's a bluff to a certain extent. Like, I still think it's far more likely than not that Joey Bosa is not on the Chargers in 2025.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at it you take the emotions out of it, right? You take the fact that, he's been one of the longest tenured Chargers out of it. From a straight business decision, you look at what he has brought on the field and where he's at in his career in relation to the amount of money he is slated to make and the injuries that have no doubt slowed and changed the way that he's able to play the game at this point in his life and his career. And you have to come to the conclusion that more than likely the Chargers are going to move on from him no matter what they say. And also, I'm sure he said, yeah, I know Joey would love to retire a Charger. I'm sure LT would have loved to have retired a Charger too. I mean, there's plenty of players out there that would have loved to have started with one team and ended with one team. Yeah. Keenan Allen, again, there is plenty of examples of people wanting that. There's very few examples of people actually getting that in any professional sport.
And then it comes down to this. Why would Joe Hortiz lie about it, right? Why would he be out here saying this if it wasn't something he actually believed? Maybe there is a trade market out there for him, right? Maybe. I mean, at least he's not closing the door to it, because it seems like what he wants the public message to be on this is, I'm not going to cut him, so don't think that you don't have to give me something for him, because I'm not just going to release him.
There's no incentive not to.
Exactly. And at the same time, you look at who I just brought up, Keenan Allen, right? They said all the right things. When Jim Harbaugh took over, they could not have been more complimentary of Keenan Allen as a player. What'd they do? They traded him for a 4th-round pick when he didn't take a pay cut. Now, I think the pay cut that Joey Bosa took last year is going to put him in good favor with this front office. I think they're going to want to do what's best for him, and what's best for him is if they are going to release him, they release him early. But the difference between this year and last year is last year they had to get under the cap before the new league year started. They had to make multiple gigantic moves before the opening of free agency. This year they have $65+ million in cap space. They don't have to do anything. They're not on the timeline that they were on last year. They can wait. They can see what happens in free agency before they make that decision. They can play the game of, hey, we're not going to release him. You're going to have to give something for us. Now, I don't think any team's taken on that number, but Joe Hortiz's comments made it seem like, hey, he's not going to tip his hand on what the Chargers are going to do because it just doesn't gain them any favor. But it was kind of cool just hearing about how he feels about attacking free agency when you have the draft coming up and what you do in free agency to set you up for the draft and just his total offseason philosophy, which we're going to get into and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys, though, that when the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because with FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you just want to bet on a fourth-quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, and one of the other things I love is that they give you the most popular parlays that are going and exactly kind of why they are popular. So one that you could go with tonight in the NBA, Tyrese Maxey of the 76ers, 20+ points, Jalen Brunson, the Knicks, 20+ points, Karl Anthony Towns, and Quentin Grimes to hit 3+ 3-pointers at plus 883. Tyrese Maxey, it told me on there, averages more than 20 points per game. So does Jalen Brunson. Karl Anthony Towns averages more than 3 3-pointers per game. Quentin Grimes, just under 2.5. So that all seems pretty likely, and I love that they lay it out right now like that. And right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. David, we have more to get into from Joe Hortiz's press conference from the NFL Scouting Combine. And thank you all for making us your first listen today. If you want to make sure, if you need a second listen, I should say, make sure to go check out the new slate at Locked On NFL, where they have 2 shows a day with Tyler the Madman Rowan, who I know is down at Indianapolis at the Combine, and also my guy Tony Wiggins, as they bring on big guests and most people from the network who cover their team every day on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast from. Also, make sure you guys don't miss tomorrow's show. Make sure you're subscribing wherever you get your podcast from and also on YouTube, because we have another special guest in the offseason of guests. We have Alex Insdorf from Bolt B and also from Guilty as Charged podcast affiliated. They're coming on the show. I'm excited to hear what he has to say because he's been killing it with his own guests recently. Excited to have him on. But let's get back to Joe Hortiz, David, and what he had to say about just kind of his offseason philosophy with free agency and the draft and kind of how those two things complement each other. This is from Eric Smith and Omar Navarro, who says, you use free agency to fill out your roster, to supplement your roster, to go get something that you need. But you know, the two play hand in hand, but I don't think you make decisions in free agency and then plan to adjust accordingly in the draft. You want to be able to draft the best player available and help the team, because the draft is a 4 or 5 year solution when you pick a player. That part stood out to me, David, because the thing is these are really important investments. He said, hey, free agent deals can be 1 to 2 year deals that aren't going to tank you. If you pick the wrong draft pick or you pick for a need instead of getting the best player available, that's a 4-year, most part, commitment, sometimes 5-year commitment if it's a first round pick. And I think that is a very smart way to look at it, because what that tells me is we can't have super obvious glaring needs going into the draft, because these guys that we're picking aren't just for this year. They're for next year and the year after that as well.
Yeah, and how many times did we see that under Tom Telesco, where he pigeonholed himself with the moves that he made in free agency, or the way that he constructed his roster?
And he got lucky a lot.
Have
too,
to
right?
really hope that the type of players that he needed would fall into his lap. And yes, he
Rashawn
definitely
Slater.
was very fortunate to get Derwin,
Herbert.
Rashawn Slater, Justin Herbert. I mean, Asante
They had no
Samuel
left tackle.
Jr.
They had no safety. They had no quarterback. They needed all those, and they fell into place for him. But it didn't always work that way either.
No, heck no. But he was one of the luckiest GMs in all of football in that
Yeah.
sense. But you don't ever want to put yourself in that situation where you have to draft a certain type of position, because that just spells disaster. Because what if you pick the wrong player and it flames out, and you just wasted a premium resource that's supposed to be something that complements and adds to your football team for multiple seasons, not just 1, 2, or 3 years, 4 to 5 years, depending on where you pick the player. So I love it. I love it 100% when he's talking about how he wants to build through the draft and kind of supplement and add to through free agency, because at the end of the day, and he said as well, your roster is never fixed. It's never perfect. It's always something that's continuously being built throughout the season, throughout the years. It's never perfect. So the pursuit of that perfection is definitely going to continue through the draft primarily.
When you believe him when he says it, because we saw it last year, right? It never stopped. It was, right at the beat. They filled what they could in the draft and the free agency, right? And then in the draft, they went out. They didn't take a wide receiver at 5, even though that's what everyone thought they needed the absolute most, right? And they still found a way to land that wide receiver. And even when they got into camp and saw what they had there, they still weren't content with that. They went out and brought in a Taylor Heineke after Easton Stick struggles. They go out when they see they don't really have that third reliable safety and maybe an AJ Finley or whoever it was at the time. They go out and they trade for an Elijah Molden, who just, you're going to get 4 years of Elijah Molden for a 2026 7th round pick, which is just
gotta love it.
Feels insane. But the good teams do this. The good teams set themselves up to where big needs happen. They have guys already on the roster that are ready to take that next step. The Chargers don't have that right now, but it's not Joe Hortiz's fault, right? That he hasn't had a chance to build up those reserves like other teams like the Eagles have, right? Whether you can stay competitive and lose big players to free agency because you don't have the money for it. He's building that right now. The Chargers should be in a code red at cornerback right now. They're not, because he hit 2 5th-round picks to where now they don't feel like they have to bring back Christian Fulton, even if he wasn't the best and struggled towards the end of the season, or bring back Asante, even if he wasn't a perfect fit, because they landed guys in the 5th round last year that would be ready to step into bigger roles, which those guys absolutely are. So love that. And I believe him when he says it, but he also talked about the trade rumors swirling, because he was asked how he was going to address the wide receiver position. He said this: "Seems like we're linked to every receiver out there. It's unbelievable," Hortiz said. "Just go on Twitter. It's like, oh, this guy, this guy, this guy. Right now, the receivers I'm focused on are the ones on our team and the ones we're evaluating in the draft and the ones we're evaluating in free agency. Other receivers we're linked to, I don't worry about them." And I thought it was funny because I guess that's coming on tomorrow. Alex Insdorf pointed out, did Joe Hortiz just tell us he has a burner account? Because he definitely doesn't have a public Twitter account yet. When this came out, it's like, well, where are you seeing this on Twitter, Joe? But it is funny for him to be like, hey, I have no idea where any of these trades are coming from or why it's all getting talked about.
When I hear this, the only thing that comes to my mind is that Joe Hortiz absolutely watches and listens to the Locked On Chargers podcast. I mean, that's just the only thing that comes to my mind, because if anybody has been championing the cause of adding weapons through a trade, it has definitely been us. And we are going to continue to do that until the Chargers emphatically address adding multiple weapons to support their superstar quarterback.
I think the one thing that's believable here is they might as well see what happens in free agency, right? You might as well see if you land a Devontae Adams who's not going to cost you anything and also doesn't count against your compensatory pick formula if you don't have to, right?
Yeah.
So should you trade for a DK Metcalf if you have a Devontae Adams that's out there lurking? Sure, there's probably an argument for it. I mean, I think for me, I think I'd probably rather go with Devontae Adams. We can have that conversation. I think it'd be a good one. Younger guy, trade for him, or get a guy that's just going to cost you money, even if it's a shorter term kind of situation. So that part I believe, because there's really no rush to do it right now, nor would you need a trade right now. See what happens in free agency. What I would say, though, is if someone is going to make a trade like that, they probably want those draft assets to use this year in this upcoming draft so they can try to fill maybe some of what they lost. So I think it could happen if there is something that's going to happen in between right now, in between free agency and the draft, I would say.
I agree.
And I'd also say that to think that Joe Hortiz doesn't have people in that front office that are looking into, and especially their pro scouts who are watching all the players at the NFL level, that they're not exploring and seeing kind of what's up with the trades. But I think that right now, Joe Hortiz is focusing on what he should. He should be focusing on free agency and all those things. And if the phone rings, it rings. But it was also cool hearing him talk about, the one move that has already been made, the one move you feel a lot better about the position group going to the season. And that is Elijah Molden getting him done. He said, hey, it's a big one for us. Obviously, we loved what he did once he got over to LA, the flexibility, the versatility he offers is what allows our defense to do. We played a lot of three safeties. It lets Derwin James be Derwin, which is exactly what we thought. And it was nice to hear him say that because it's like, yeah, that's why this was such an important thing to get done.
I mean, it's the most important thing to allow Derwin James to get back to the all-pro level we all know that he is capable of being.
And he did. Yeah.
And he absolutely did. And Elijah Molden being on the back end, allowing that freedom, it only makes this football team that much more effective.
And it just shows you exactly why it was so important. And sometimes it's not even about the player you're signing as much as it is what that does for another player on your roster and helping Derwin James be the best version of himself, which we know can be a game-wrecking level player when, you have guys that you actually can trust behind him. And you don't just need Derwin James to cover up all the little flaws you have defensively, which is what happened too often under Derwin James or under Brandon Staley. You couldn't use him at what he did best because you needed to kind of fill the flaws of the other players that were surrounding him on defense. But it was interesting as I think back to last year. I just thought of this. Jim Harbaugh saying, hey, as much as we want to get Justin Herbert weapons, we want to get Derwin James some weapons.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Daniel, I swear.
Elijah Molden is a weapon, and they found a way to bring Derwin James, one of his guys, back. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are back here tomorrow for another big, giant special guest, thanks to our great special guest, Booker David Drogmeyer, because we have Alex Insdorf, I believe, on the show for the first time. Really excited to have him on and get his insight. He's been killing it on socials all over the place, and I know he has a plan for this offseason, so I'm excited to hear what he has in store for the Chargers this year. But to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show every day on all of our social media on Twitter at Locked On LAC. For me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogmeyer at Dro Talk SD on Twitter, as well as on Instagram at Locked On Chargers and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But excited to talk with Alex Insdorf tomorrow. Make sure you guys are here for that. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.